today we have an event here and we're going to be talking about neurodiversity, and we could not have found a better person to do that with. Before we start that though, I would like to take some time to recognize our sponsors. Regroup, 360 Interactive, and Adobe. They help us put together the events that we host for you guys. So a big thank you to them. We also have more information on the chapter at amadetroit.org. If you guys are interested in learning more about the American Marketing Association, our Detroit chapter, if you're interested in becoming a member or volunteering, there's plenty of information on there, and I'm also available to answer any questions as well. I've been with the group for about 3 years now and really enjoyed not only being able to be behind the scenes at events like this, but to also network and grow my career also. So it's been a big pleasure to be a part of, and I encourage everyone to, again, check out our website, amadetroit.org, and get more information on our chapter, becoming a member, volunteer opportunities. We do have some open board positions, so there's a lot of information that you can check out there. But today we have Corinne Myers. Corinne Myers is the Director of Brand and Integrated Strategy at Simpson Scarborough, where she provides strategic oversight on the development of higher education, brand experience, and content strategies. So all in all, you seem like a pretty big expert, pretty important job. Previously, Corinne created multi-channel content strategies for national brands at Convince and Convert, and oversaw digital strategy at the University of Michigan as their Associate Director of Marketing. So some local ties to U of M. I'm a big fan, go blue. Without further ado, I'm gonna give it over to Corinne. I want her to have the most time. We do have a Q&A section here where you can ask questions. We're gonna have a little bit of time at the end. We'll be able to review those, but as you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section, and then Corinne and I will go over them at the end. And without further ado, Corinne, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Let's make sure that this works. It never wants to when it needs to. All right, I assume you all can see presentation and not my cheat notes.
I can see your screen. No cheat notes.
Perfect. Yeah, so thank you. So today we're going to talk about marketing and neurodiversity, and specifically how basic best practices actually help you get closer to inclusive communications. I often see organizations and businesses spin their wheels around how do we ensure more inclusive communications, how we guarantee our content is more accessible, but they often overlook the basics of just good experiences, usability, and customer-centric approaches. And so I'm actually going to go through a couple of areas that you should be doing no matter your customer, but also help make your marketing more inclusive towards neurodiversity and neurodivergent individuals. So a couple of notes here. Corinne Myers should be on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on TikTok, if you do that kind of thing. So I think I've grabbed my name across most channels, so that's where you can find me. And also special thanks to AMA Detroit for giving me this opportunity. All right, so let's get into it. So we're going to talk for two main buckets here. So inclusive marketing and neurodiversity, like what is it? What are the definitions? What does it mean? And then get into those experience best practices. I don't have that many slides, so I'm going to go take some time, take some breaths, drink a lot of water. But I hope this is helpful in terms of understanding what neurodiversity is, and then also how this can be applied to the day-to-day that you were all doing in marketing. All right, so the first area, inclusive marketing and neurodiversity. If you take nothing away but these three things, I will be happy for this section. So inclusion efforts and definitions often leave out neurodiversity. Inclusive marketing needs to be clear and accessible. And then neurodiversity means many, many things to many different people, and everyone's individual experiences are unique. So I was diagnosed with ADHD last year at the age of 31, and realized much of my life I had symptoms and was dealing with things, but didn't have a name for them. Since that diagnosis and lots of therapy, discovering medication and understanding better how my brain works, my areas where I struggle, but also areas where I actually flourish, I've had the opportunity to look at marketing through a neurodiversity lens and actually connect those pieces, because before I wasn't looking at it through that lens. And so now being able to have that, I've got 10 plus years of experience in the marketing industry, but also this diagnosis and being able to look through that lens has been really incredible, but also eye-opening in terms of our shortcomings in the marketing industry. For this presentation, I was looking high and low for a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement or an inclusive communications definition that included neurodiversity. And I have yet to find one. So if you have one, please share. But I did not find one that exclusively calls out neurodiversity. I want to note that inclusive communications, inclusive marketing means a lot of things. And so there's a definition from Salesforce that I'm going to share and briefly read to you off this slide. So content that elevates diverse voices and role models, decreases cultural bias, and leads to positive social change through thoughtful and respectful content. It's a pretty good definition. The diverse voices, and elevating those voices, that's an incredibly important part of inclusive communications. I'm not going to focus there. I'm going to focus in the neurodiversity part, but you'll notice that this also doesn't necessarily include neurodiversity. And like I said, I haven't found yet a DE&I statement or a definition that explicitly calls it out. So I love Salesforce. I'm actually going to suggest Salesforce adds aligned to this definition of inclusive marketing to include content that is clear, accessible, and puts the customer's experience first. Clear and accessible, we'll get into that, but accessibility, often that conversation is talked about in terms like technical, like closed captioning and alternative text on photos and things like that. All of that is incredibly important and valid, but we often don't talk about best practices in terms of clear communication, accessible communication. And so I'll get into some of that as well. But again, if you see a definition that has neurodiversity called out, please let me know. I'm now on a hunt and I'm determined to find one. So getting into neurodiversity. So if you Google neurodiversity, you may come across some controversies, which is interesting because I didn't realize how complicated the term was until I started doing some research when I was diagnosed or getting diagnosed. And really, neurodiversity is a term and a viewpoint that essentially says brain differences are normal. It's almost like it's equivalent to biodiversity, right? Different plants, different animals thrive in different environments. The term neurodiversity is used in the same way. It's just a natural development of the human brain. Now, that paired with the struggles that individuals have in their own unique experiences as neurodivergent individuals, there's different thoughts around what's a disability, what's not, what's different, what's a disability, what's not. I'm not going to get any of that. This is not the webinar for that topic, a whole different webinar. But I just wanted to point out that neurodiversity, the term, is around this idea that, the differences in the brain are normal, and we should celebrate the positives first before we point out the the shortcomings. So personally, I am really, really good with strategy, puzzles, pattern recognition. If I could just do strategy and pattern recognition and connecting things all day, I would. But I also have some issues with executive functioning, with attention and things like that. So there are struggles, and my struggles are very unique to me, and there are positives. And so now I've introduced you all to me, and you've met one person who has ADHD, because if you meet somebody else, they're going to be very different and have different struggles and strengths than I do. So again, it's not a shared necessarily experience, it's all a very unique experience and differences. And so the biggest takeaway here is you don't know anybody until you ask them. And so you can't take an ADHD diagnosis and understand someone and what they do and how they act and their struggles and their strengths. You have to really get to know that person. It's up to 15% of the population is neurodivergent. So again, ensuring that, understanding that neurodiversity is kind of a hot topic. It's interesting. You should Google it and look it up, the different thoughts around it. It often includes autism, ADHD. There's a couple other diagnoses in there, and it really can be empowering to start with the positives and think about, what is normal and who gets to decide. Neurotypical versus neurodivergent, who gets to decide what's normal, what's better, and really flipping the conversation to, who gets to pick and why do we have to pick, and the strengths around that. So just gonna briefly cover that and get into the best practices next, but wanted to pull out that word, acknowledge some of the controversy, and then provide some personal anecdotes there from my perspective. Okay, so experience best practices. So like I said, there are lots of opportunities for your content, your marketing to be more accessible. And there are things above and beyond best practices. This is in no way encompassing everything that can be done to increase the accessibility or inclusiveness of your content. This doesn't include, the diversity, the marginalized voices and things like that. That is not covered in here. Again, really focusing in on neurodiversity, and also noting that this is from my perspective and my viewpoint. Again, others will have other suggestions. So this is just a start. And I really encourage everybody to look into it more and find more ways to implement inclusive communications in their day-to-days. So we're going to start here. And if you know anything about me, experience is one of my favorite all-time topics. I think my team is probably tired of hearing me talk about it, but I just love experience, and I love the human experience cycle. I love brand experience. I love content experience. I love experience for experiences. So this is a really, really great way to think about marketing, all marketing in general. So I'm going to go through this, and this is from Qualtrics. Qualtrics has an amazing website full of brand experience, customer experience, information and content that I probably spend way too much time on, but it's really interesting information. And why experience matters. Salesforce came out with a report that stated that as of 2022, experience is just as important as products and services to customers. So if your experience is bad, they're going to leave, because it is as important as products and the pricing and the services. So really focusing on experience in addition to what you're selling is super important. So this human experience cycle goes through a couple of steps. So experience is an expectation. So let's start there. Everybody brings expectations to an experience. So let's say, for example, I go to your website and I'm looking for information. My expectation is that I find that information pretty easily. And that's because I've gone to lots of websites in my life and I have found the information I wanted. And so I expect your website to also do that for me, right? We bring expectations to experiences from outside the company we're interacting with, from our personal lives and all those kinds of things. And so that expectation and understanding those expectations of customers is super important. So with those expectations, I have the experience, and based on the gap between my expectations and what actually happened, I develop perceptions. Perceptions are like, wow, your website was great. I found all the information I wanted. Or wow, your website never loaded and doesn't have a navigation. Those perceptions build up to form attitudes. And that is really where your brand starts to form, right? Brands being the associations individuals have with your company. If someone sees your logo, if someone interacts with your organization, what are they associating with you? What do they think about you? That kind of thing. Those are the attitudes. And those are formed after those perceptions kind of solidify. From there, people act. Do they stay on the website and fill out a form? Do they check out? Do they buy something? Or do they jump off? And then that behavior becomes an expectation for next time. Attitudes become experiences for next time. And so this is a cycle really of how does an individual experience the world, but also applies really, really well to marketing instances. Again, if they walk into your place of business, if they have a call with you, if they send you a ticket to help with a technical issue, what are their expectations? Did you meet them? If so, great. If not, you're going to have problems, and really understanding the gaps. So we're starting here because it's important to note expectations and experiences and understanding why I use the word experiences and best practices and experiences, because this is such an essential part of marketing and what we do as professionals. Individuals judge experiences based on 3 criteria: effort, emotion, and success. So if I'm again, website is one example, but if I'm walking into a store and I'm looking to go buy pomegranates, which is something I just did, by the way, there's like a national pomegranate shortage, which is awful. But anyway, so I walk into the store looking for pomegranates, specifically the ones that are already taken out of the pomegranate, Anyway, I know it's very bougie. I'm looking for this product. I'm on the Meijer website. They like say it's in aisle X, go find it. I can't find it. I'm frustrated, right? So not only was it a lot of effort because I went to the store, I had to go through my phone. I had to ask somebody for help. I had to do this whole roundabout thing. Not only did that happen, I also was not successful in getting pomegranates because apparently they were out and their website didn't reflect that. And now I'm frustrated, right? So effort, success, and emotion are really how individuals are judging experiences. And that effort, success, and emotion are based on their expectations. So I didn't expect necessarily to, walk up and have it at the front door, the pomegranates, but I did have a level of expectation that they were in stock because the website had told me so. So again, those experiences and how they connect and how individuals view those experiences is incredibly important. Okay. So let's get into some of the best practices for experiences you can implement that also help get to a better place in terms of inclusive marketing. So again, these are best practices that you should be following regardless, but also help with that inclusive marketing. So I think we've probably all have at one point been in a college course where we heard KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? Is the term. It is my least favorite acronym because it implies that simple is stupid. When in reality, simple, we know, actually is the best performing kind of content. Simplicity in design is the best performing kind of design. And simplicity in general actually makes you seem and build your credibility and makes you seem smarter. So I'm actually going to change KISS to KISSes. I thought because it's Valentine's Day week, my kids have like 30 bags of candy because we need more candy in our lives. And they're all Valentines and hearts and all that stuff. Anyway, I thought this was an appropriate acronym. One, because again, keep it simple, stupid is my least favorite. So we're going to throw that out and we're going to replace it with kisses. And I'm going to go through each of these, but really looking at what best practices, again, things you should already be doing, will help with inclusive marketing and getting you to a better place in terms of inclusive marketing. So keep it keep it simple, searchable, expected, and supportive. So kisses. Now I'm double checking to make sure that actually spells kisses. Okay. So we're going to go through simple, searchable, expected, and supportive. These buckets of categories that should be applied. And this is across the funnel. This is, these things are applicable to everything from awareness, so like display ads, to social, organic social, to your website, to your print materials, to your in-store signage. Really, these can be applied across the funnel, across channels, and really are best practices and guideposts across those experiences. Most of this is around content. I do want to note that things like alt text or visuals like graphics and photos, I didn't include that in this presentation, but those are also things to keep in mind as you're looking at inclusive communications. We're going to start with simple. So simple is like it sounds. So that's avoiding jargon and insider terms, using plain spoken words, keeping sentences really short, writing for 6th to 8th grade reading levels, active voice, white space, and visual hierarchy. So there's a couple of examples here, and actually I have the sources that I pulled these from, but there's an individual in the higher ed industry, her name's Alexa. She does a lot of accessibility work, and she actually pulled this into an example that she was using. This is a tweet from President Biden and a screenshot of a long worded document. As you can imagine, that's really, really hard to read. It's not accessible in that a screen reader cannot read flattened text. Flattened text is like text that you're essentially taking a photo of. So there's lots of problems with this. But beyond the accessibility of it, it's impossible to read, and it's just really not good practice, which is interesting coming from the government. Or maybe it's not interesting. Maybe we should expect, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, not a good practice. And then there's bestfriends.org. This is an example of jargon. So this is actually a really good exercise, is when you're looking at your website navigation, do the topics, do the options actually make sense to somebody who has no idea what you do? So for bestfriends.org, the example is the sanctuary. It's internal words. It's, it might be it's not a made up word, but essentially it's their own jargon. I don't know what that is. And as a user coming to their site, I'm not sure what I'd be clicking on. And so it's actually a really good exercise to go to your website and look for opportunities to make those navigation options clearer. And also, are there any overlaps? We often see services and products separated, but often overlap enough to be one. And a couple of examples of like internal language. So again, making sure that the words you're using are super clear, and have that avoid the insider language. If you're going to use social media and you're going to post content, use a link to bigger pieces of content. Don't put them into the social post. Don't take a screenshot like this and post them. Don't put them into stories. Don't put them in an Instagram post. Link to larger pieces of content. Pull out the most important parts, perhaps. Look for opportunities to summarize, but again, a link to that larger text. And then also there's opportunities to check your print materials or your documents for that 6th to 8th grade reading level. So there's Microsoft Word has a test, has an opportunity when you do like spell check, you can look for that. And there's other tools. 6th or 8th grade reading level is not the actual grade. It's not like right to somebody who's in 6th grade. That's not an accurate representation of that ranking system. And this is really 6th to 8th grade level is the best place to be. It's clear and it's shown over and over again and research to be actually best, even for those individuals who may be experts in the area that you're writing for. If your writing is super technical and super like academic, 12th grade reading level is also okay. But really, if you're serving any sort of general public or individuals who may not be experts, you really should be writing at that 6th to 8th grade level. So there's lots of other things that you can do to make content simpler, but these are really the big ones in terms of ensuring content is clear. We at Simpson Scarborough say clear is kind. And I really, really love that statement because clarity is really where individuals can take action and understand and be empowered and understand what they're getting into, what they're buying, what they're agreeing to, and feel good about it. And they're more likely then to convert. The next one is searchable. So the visual here is a bit of a squint test, and that's on purpose. So customers can scan all content. If you can say that, you're good. If not, there's some opportunities for improvement. And then customers can search all digital content. So scannability on documents. So there's a couple of different ways you can look at this. There's an F pattern. So customers typically look at the left-hand side and they look across the headline and they go down a little bit and they eventually kind of taper off in terms of what they're reading. So adding headlines and subheadlines, making sure that bulleted lists and numbered lists are used, writing an inverted pyramid. So marketers, I'm also guilty of this, tend to be like long-winded at the front. They tend to use like fluffy brand language and like, we're innovative, and innovation is probably the most overused word in the world, right? So all these words and things we say at the front to make people like believe our brand is X, Y, and Z is really unnecessary. And you can look at there's lots of books and research on this, that the the opening paragraphs where you're like saying things but not really saying things are actually just hurting your marketing and conversion rates. So ensuring that individuals can look for content. They don't have to read the whole thing. They can if they want. There's some links that go out to other content in there, but it's not littered with links everywhere. And then also search. So if I can Control F and find something, great. If your website is searchable, amazing. If it's not, you should really look at getting search installed into the website. Search is is the #1 way individuals find brands, new brands, but also the #1 way customers research brands. And so in terms of Google search, right, if you're showing up there, great, but also they're coming to your website and expecting some level of search. In conjunction with that, if you're using jargon or you're making up words, you're going to be less searchable because people aren't going to search for those terms. They're going to search for the ones that they know. And so ensuring that if you're using branded words or product names or anything like that that are not necessarily common knowledge, you're pairing those with at least the regular, the normal words, if you will. If not altogether, naming your products and services with actual intuitive names. The next one is expected. And this goes back to and directly calls back to the human experience cycle. So if you really had to say it in one sentence, customers hate change and they hate the unexpected. And so you can Google worst websites of 2023 and it'll be a great time because there's 30 blogs that have lists of bad websites. Bad being usability. So for Goodreads, for example, there is no top nav. There's no top navigation, which is an interesting, I'm not sure what the logic is, but as you can imagine, Somebody who comes to the website expecting a top navigation on the desktop will be very disappointed and frustrated, and then also confused. We often see marketers want to do cool things like, side scrolling on desktops, which is not the best function. We often see, oh, we want to do something cool or design something cool, and we want to put the navigation on the bottom or the sides and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying you can't be creative, but you should pick your battles, because your customers are spending all of their time on other websites. So like the 1, 3, 5 times they visit yours, they're not going to have enough time for that learning curve to figure out what you're doing with your navigation, what you're doing with your content. So changing it up and breaking that expectation is only going to hurt your conversion rates and your performance. This is the same for, if you're in Michigan, you know that Meijer is redoing their store layouts. Now, I think the layout is better now that I've been there multiple times, but I'm guaranteed they got a lot of angry emails and phone calls because the change in the layout, the expectation is jarring and takes a while. So Meijer's changes, I believe, were good, but jarring at first. Website changes where you're putting the navigation, I don't even know where for good reads, is not. So really understanding the differences between change for good and optimization and better business versus just for the sake of something different or new or out of the box thinking. Expected also comes in the form of when we ask individuals to do something. If we've asked them to convert, if we're asking them to take an action, and they're presented with a 20-field sign-up form for a newsletter, they're going to be upset. And that's because, again, they're spending all their time on other websites, and those other websites are not asking them to fill out 20 fields on the form. They are, they're on Amazon, where I can literally click the product, click buy, and it's at my house in 2 days. That's what you're competing with. You're competing with that. You're competing with an instant answer on Twitter for a customer concern. You're competing with 3-field forms as opposed to whatever this many ones. So you have to look at it in terms of context of other experiences that customers are having and really applying it to your own. And so really looking at, again, through the lens of neurodiversity, things that are simple, searchable, and expected really help out with that executive functioning, the mental load, and things like that. So often individuals who are neurodivergent struggle with working memory. So remembering something and then applying it soon after. So things like a new navigation, these long forms, changes in expected layouts and usability will only actually exacerbate the issues. So whereas I shouldn't say normal customers, I just told you all not to use that, where neurotypical customers would not necessarily struggle as much, but would still be upset, neurodivergent customers are going to struggle more with that. So really keeping that in mind. And so the simplicity also ties back into that, right? So if your sentences are short, your writing is clear, again, neurotypical customers will appreciate that, but neurodivergent customers will really benefit. So again, these things are basic best practices that neurotypical and neurodivergent customers will benefit from. But especially neurodivergent customers, as we look at clarity, searchability, scannability, and ensuring that expectations are met within these systems. All right, the last one is supportive. So supportive is actually an interesting topic. So I really love, so a colleague of mine, Steve App, we were talking about utility content. So utility being both utility and why, like utility. And if you have ever read Jay Baer's book on utility, or seen him speak about utility, you'll understand what I'm saying. When I was at Convince and Convert, that's Jay Baer's agency, had some conversations about utility. I've got the book behind me somewhere. Anyway, utility is this idea that you're going to create content that is helpful to customers. And you're not really going to necessarily ask them to do something. You're just going to be helpful. Steve App, in the same sense, actually used the term altruistic content. And actually, that's what I put on this slide here, is because I really like that idea. So if you know who, is it Hank Green? I get his brother mixed up. Anyway, they launched ASU, Hank Green, and YouTube launched a study hall YouTube channel. And essentially it helps prospective students with all things college and university. So admissions, financial aid, courses, things like that. So this is altruistic utility content. This is super helpful content that helps individuals navigate. And it's great because it's good for business. So if you know or are familiar with HubSpot, HubSpot has all this amazing content that's super helpful. And their inbound marketing game is like on fire, right? They are successful because of this approach. So helpful content, and especially content that is helpful in general, but also helpful in terms of navigating your products, your services, mortgage, car buying, insurance. That stuff is so intimidating that I wish, those kinds of companies would provide levels of utility content, altruistic content, to really help individuals understand and navigate those things. And again, in terms of neurotypical customers, they will benefit, but neurodivergent customers will also, and more so, benefit from content that's helpful to be helpful. There's also the need for concrete steps. So there's a screenshot here of a local plumber. They have this like schedule an appointment. So you click on the big red button, which is super clear and obvious and where I expected it to be. And they have a step-by-step guide on how to get an appointment scheduled. And so it walks you through the steps. It asks you simple questions. It's in plain language. It was great. And so concrete steps in that sense are great. Website or print or in store. Again, understanding like, what do I need to do next, and setting expectations, right? So part of the human experience cycle is understanding expectations, but also how can you better set expectations? And then finally, in the moment help. So things, if someone is trying to do something on your website, or they are in your place of business, or they're on the phone with you, and there is any sort of like complicated topic or action or a change of some sort, providing content or context within that moment as opposed to later or before is super helpful. Again, working memory is often a challenge for neurodivergent individuals. And so doing like, for example, watching a video to learn something and then having to remember that content for a task later on is difficult. And so having actually helpful content during the action you're asking them to take is a better alternative. Examples of this. So for example, Meyer, when they redesigned, they could have provided some wayfinding in their store to help people understand what had changed, where to go, and things like that. That wasn't the case. If your website does need to change or adjust, perhaps it's a prompt saying what has happened. If your sales cycle or your customer service process has changed, are you letting individuals know about the changes and helping them navigate, especially, customers who maybe are not online as much and they're coming into the store or they're calling, ensuring that experience is good requires expectation setting, in the moment help, and concrete steps. So I said I would stop at 12:45, and I'm pretty sure I'm like right on time. So that was super quick. Again, this is in no way, shape, or form comprehensive. But again, I often see over and over again businesses struggling to understand or how to implement inclusive communications and accessible communications. when in reality, they don't even have the best practices. They don't have the foundation even implemented first. And so to build accessibility and other things on top of a foundation that's shaky and doesn't include those best practices will not be fruitful. So really establishing those best practices. I really encourage you to look at Norman Nielsen Group. They have 10 usability heuristics that are really, really great to look through, and where I grabbed some of these examples from Nielsen Norman Group, the 10 heuristics of usability. They'll go through all of them, provide some examples, and actually can be applied to things beyond the website. Also, understanding if you're using marketing channels, I'm sure they change daily. They change how they do things, all that kind of stuff. Ensuring that you understand the tools and resources available to you to adjust, accessibility, making sure you understand that Instagram stories, for example, are not screen reader friendly. So those kinds of things, and really looking for opportunities to stay up to date on how to ensure, that accessibility and inclusive communications. And then finally, really understanding that people are often concerned about dumbing down their content, but research after research has shown that short sentences, clear writing, easy words is by and far the best approach. It's the most usable, retainable, and learnable content. And that is a consensus across all types of customers, from experts to just general public individuals. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna hand it back over.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Corinne. I will have to say I am an avid Meyer shopper, and when you were on eXpecting, you were talking about them changing the format. I felt that personally, because I remember walking to the store the first time. I'm like, what is this? I was not notified. Who do I complain to? So we were talking about the complaint letters. I was probably the first person to complain about that. Well, we do have a couple questions. I'll read the first one here. It says, I've read that certain fonts are better for ADHD and possibly others, such as autism. The font I've read about is Cosmic Sans, and which ironically is also the font everyone says don't use. Is there an outline resource that you know of that has more information like this?
Yeah, so that is true. There are specific kinds of fonts that are better. And it's sans serif fonts for sure, simple fonts. And there are a couple of resources. So I mentioned Nielsen Norman Group. They also have content and blogs about fonts and font usage. And there's also a website called understood.org that has a lot of great resources on fonts and things like that for autism and ADHD.
Gotcha. Perfect. Kind of going off on this. This is another resource question. It states, you had mentioned that content should be at a 6th grade reading level. Is there a guide for determining what reading level your content is? It's been a minute or two since I was in 6th grade.
Yeah, so just a note on the 6th to 8th grade reading level, it's actually not literally 6th graders. It's not, I didn't write it, so it's not my fault, but it's not very clear. But yes, so if you're writing, for example, if you're writing in Microsoft Word and you go to look at, word count or character count, there's actually a line there that will give you a score on the level of reading. And I forget the specific name, but it's right in that report. And there are other tools online, but it depends on where you're writing the content. And if Word is where you're mostly at, there is that tool built right into the software.
Ready? Looks like we put another one that came in here. Okay, it says, I've read a lot of different material on neurodiversity, inclusion in the office, marketing, communications, etc. Is there a source with some concrete ideas/tips? I'm not sure if these are all applicable, but items such as recording a video and include a one-page bullet list recapping the main points, similar to a book summary app, or allow an employee to pre-record a webinar and play it back, only doing a Q&A session if they struggle on camera, or redoing our style guide to include updated font options accessible by all, sans, serifs, for serifs, etc.
Yes. So neurodiversity in the workplace is a really interesting topic, and like an entire 3 webinars on its own. I have a book. Give me 1 second. I have a book. It's called The Neurodiverse Workplace. It's by Victoria Honeyborn. It's got really, really actionable tips in it for workplace. It actually walks through neurodiversity, and then provides very specific examples. It actually provides the Disabilities Act and your responsibility as an employer to neurodivergent employees. So that is a great place to start. It's called The Neurodiverse Workplace. It's got like a sticky note cover on it. I got it on Amazon. It's a really great resource. So I suggest to start there.
Perfect. Awesome. And it looks like we have someone requesting that you list out the resources and further info in the Q&A. Maybe instead of doing that, maybe you can email that to me and then I can share it with all the attendees after the fact. So we have that via email.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I will provide a big list of resources that wouldn't fit on a slide, and you can send that out with the recording. That sounds great.
Awesome. A couple more here. Nick is asking, what about bionic fonts?
I think it's really interesting. If you Google it, and I think this is what you're referring to, is where there's certain words that are bolded to help readability. Really cool tool. I don't think it's necessarily available to all, and it requires levels of web development, if I'm understanding that correctly. I think it's a cool idea, and I hope they do more with it and roll it out in a way that is it's available to more people.
Gotcha.
That way you can switch it on and off as you're going through websites.
Oh, okay. Nice. Someone else asking about those links. And so again, we'll get those links to the attendees after the fact. I have a question. And I mean, you and I had talked a little bit before how, like, some people are going back into office a little bit more. And I think with that, we're seeing people, like myself, I'm fully remote, where I think a lot of people were always worried about culture, beforehand, but now when you have so many remote people, that's an extra layer. That's another challenge where you kind of have to kind of meet people where they are. If people are at home, you can only do so much. As it pertains to neurodiversity in the workplace, do you see any good examples of people doing that when they work remotely? Or maybe do you think that's something that, isn't an issue, or is it an issue that, we're maybe just now taking on? Like, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I think there's so in my pursuit of looking for neurodiversity in DE&I statements or inclusive communications definitions, I was also looking at publicly available employee handbooks and HR documents, and oftentimes don't see neurodiversity there. So I think we're behind a little bit. And so I wouldn't expect necessarily for us to be good at any of this at this point in the workplace. However, I do find that so I've personally hesitated with acknowledging or providing HR with official documentation around my neurodiversity to get accommodations. So I think there's a lot of hesitancy to to say that out loud across employees. So what you can really do instead of making employees out themselves essentially and forcing them to disclose that information in order to accommodate, you really should employ best practices. It really does come down to best practices in the workplace. Do you understand your employees' communication preferences? Do they have time to think about the information and content you're sending them? Are you adding agendas to meetings? Are you sending out prep materials in enough space and time to have prep? Are you setting expectations in meetings? So really best practices in terms of communications and things like that really are missing across many workplaces and really are where you need to start. So personally, I find written communication easier to comprehend, use, and act on. I find it difficult to take direction via audio. And as somebody who works a remote 100%, taking direction via audio via Zoom is even more difficult. And so I request a follow-up and a recap with those step-by-step directions if needed. I also provide that to my employees. But that's best practice. That's not necessarily something that needs to be different or unique for those neurodivergent employees. So really looking at your processes and something seriously, something as simple as, do you provide agendas with enough time in between and prep materials? And then do you set expectations about what's going to happen in that meeting? And if not, that's kind of where you need to start is those spaces.
I cannot agree with that. I'm in so many meetings where I feel like I'm just in the meeting just to be in the meeting. So had we set the agenda or just said, hey, this is what we hope to get out of it, I think it would have been a whole other ball game. We'll give everyone a couple more minutes, one more minute to send any more questions. But in the meantime, Quinn, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I was telling our board how I was excited about this one because I feel like it's something that is often overlooked. And just what we were just talking about, agendas and setting expectations on what we should be doing in meetings. I think people have gotten away from a little bit, and I think with people working from home and a lot of us on more Zoom meetings than we've probably ever been on, that only makes it a little bit more challenging. So this is very insightful. When you send over the links, could you also send over again your handles again? I think it was just your name, but just so people can get a hold of you if they have any questions or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it is my name. I'm active on Twitter. I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm active on TikTok, but it's a different personality and a different tone, I guess, if you will. It's all about ADHD, but it's more of my attempt at comic relief from the struggles of ADHD. And so TikTok is a bit more fun, but I do use Twitter and LinkedIn professionally and happy to answer any questions. My email is also corinne@corinnemyers.com, and I'm happy to answer questions or take any feedback, or I can point you to more resources if the list doesn't necessarily answer what is needed. I think there was the last question that came in when you were talking.
Yes, one more I do see. It says, does Corinne provide presentations to individual companies?
Oh, I don't even see that one. Yes, I do. Depending on workload and my two children's many soccer events, but yes, happy to have a conversation. And again, my email, that will all be provided after this and we can talk. If not me, I do know other people that do as well. So happy to do the connecting.
Okay, perfect.
And then there's somebody who was asking about, I was going to say some marketing recommendations for neurodiversity mirror best practices for marketing in general, short videos, get to the point, etc. Would you say it's more conscious marketing in general? Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I would say that best practices and conscious marketing, I would interchange those terms, but I agree that short videos to the point, although I will caution that short videos have their purpose and serve their purpose, but also longer videos. This idea that, our attention spans are getting shorter, that's not true. It's actually just the content there's just so much of it and it's not really relevant or relatable. So if you think about what content you spend time with, it's because it's relevant and relatable to you, but a lot of other content is not. And so where, yes, 15-second videos on TikTok, we spend a lot of time there. I'm also watching 2-hour videos on experience management, which is something that I love. So I think ensuring that the right place and right time and right mindset, right, is what you're thinking about. YouTube for longer videos, TikTok for shorter, for now anyway, until TikTok is over YouTube. But also, like, what is the person trying to do? What are their goals and how do you help them get there? From the best practices standpoint is definitely what I would suggest thinking about.
Gotcha. All righty, perfect. Well, we are right up against our time limit. So again, Corinne, thank you very much. And I will get the email out to all our attendees once she sends it over. And I'll tell everyone to have a good rest of your day.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.